My son stood in the church lobby, surrounded by reporters and family friends, grinning like he'd already inherited the kingdom, certain that I'd walk away empty-handed from my ex-wife's fortune. And then his voice carried across the marble hall. "Dad's just here for the free sandwiches." People laughed, and I felt every pair of eyes burning holes through me. But what I didn't know then was that one meeting later, in a quiet boardroom, a single sentence would turn his smirk into something I'd never seen on his face before: fear. Before we dive in, hit subscribe if this is your first time here, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing the mix of states and countries following these stories. Now, my name is Eli Parker, I'm 66, and when this all began, I was living in a creaky upstairs apartment over a pawn shop in Cleveland, fixing my own leaky radiator with duct tape because the landlord wouldn't return calls. Winters meant Lake Erie wind shoving through every gap in the windows, and most mornings I'd be up early patching someone else's busted circuit in the building because I couldn't stand to see folks go without light. I hadn't seen my ex-wife, Victoria Hale, in over 15 years. Not since she traded our kitchen table and secondhand furniture for the chrome and glass world of high-stakes logistics. Mason, our only son, followed her there without hesitation, taking her last name and carving me out of his life like I was an embarrassing chapter in a book he didn't want to show anyone. So when the call came on that gray Tuesday from an attorney I'd never met, saying Victoria was gone and the service would be Friday, I just stood there in my cold kitchen staring at the old coffee pot sputtering on the stove, wondering if I even had a place at her funeral, let alone in whatever came after. When Friday came, the sky hung low and heavy over Cleveland, the kind of January gray that makes even the church's stained glass look muted. I'd worn my one good suit, the same one I'd bought for Mason's college graduation but never got to wear because my name wasn't on the guest list, and polished my shoes until I could almost see my reflection. The chapel's double doors groaned as I stepped in, the warm air smelling of lilies and polished wood. Heads turned, conversations faltered, and though no one said my name, I could feel it passing silently from one mouth to another. Mason spotted me instantly, and his smile was sharp, practiced, the kind you put on before a public speech. He crossed the aisle in long strides, hand outstretched not to greet me, but to block my way like a security guard at a nightclub. "Dad," he said quietly, but with enough venom to curdle the air, "this isn't your scene. Mom's friends don't need this complication." The word stung more than if he'd just called me useless. I glanced over his shoulder at the front pew, where executives in tailored suits sat like a board meeting dressed for mourning, one of them leaning toward another to whisper before both looked back at me. Mason didn't even lower his voice for the next part. "You had your chance to be part of this family. You chose your toolbox instead." The people around him chuckled under their breath, polite but cruel. I forced a nod, moved to the back row, and sat alone beneath a drafty vent. Through the hymns and eulogies, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was an intruder in a museum dedicated to a woman I'd once known better than anyone, yet who now felt like a stranger, sculpted in marble and applause. When the service ended, the line to offer condolences wound past me like I wasn't even there. Two old neighbors from our starter home days passed by. One gave me a faint smile, the other muttered, "She really outgrew him." My hands tightened around the folded program until the edges tore. I was about to leave quietly, to slip back into the cold, when a woman in a charcoal suit stepped into my path. "Mr. Parker, I'm Annika Patel, Victoria's attorney. She insisted you be present for the reading of her will, today." Her eyes held something between duty and curiosity, and before I could respond, Mason appeared at her side, incredulous. "Why? He's not." But she cut him off gently. "It's in the instructions, Mason. Both of you must attend, now." And just like that, the humiliation that had settled over me like a heavy coat shifted into something else, confusion laced with a strange, cautious spark I hadn't felt in years. I didn't say a word to Mason as we filed out of the chapel and into the biting wind, but inside, something had shifted. For years I'd told myself it was easier to keep my head down, to let the past lie where it fell. But the way he'd looked at me in there, like I was an embarrassing accident that had wandered in off the street, lit a slow, steady burn in my chest. If Victoria had truly put my name in her will after all this time, there had to be a reason, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. Back in my apartment that night, the radiator clicking like it was clearing its throat, I pulled a cardboard box from the closet, the one I hadn't touched in a decade. Inside were snapshots from when life was simpler. Victoria in a thrift store coat holding a thermos of cocoa at Mason's Little League game, our beat-up Ford idling in the background. A worn photo of the three of us on a pier in Toledo, my arm around them both. I studied her smile, trying to remember when it had started to fade. I jotted a list on the back of an old electric bill. 1. Show up. 2. Listen. 3. Don't take the bait. That was the plan. Quiet, deliberate, no more shrinking back when someone tried to shove me to the sidelines. Around 8, there was a knock. It was Jade, the high school kid from the first floor who I'd helped with her science fair project last year. She stepped in holding 2 steaming mugs. "You look like you're about to take a test you didn't study for," she said, eyeing the pile of photos. I told her about the funeral, about Annika's insistence I be there for the will. Jade just shrugged like it was obvious. "Then you go. You sit in that room, and you make them look you in the eye. You fixed everyone else's broken lights in this building. Maybe it's time to fix your own." She grinned, slid one of the mugs toward me, and before she left, added, "Need a ride? I've got my license now." I almost laughed. Her car was a battered Civic with a duct-taped mirror, but something in her tone made me nod. If Mason thought I'd be an invisible shadow in that will reading, he was about to learn I knew how to stand in the light, even if it made him squint. Annika's office was in one of those old bank buildings downtown, the kind with brass railings polished so bright they seemed to hum under the fluorescent lights. Jade dropped me off at the curb, promising to wait in the car with a paperback, and I climbed the stone steps feeling like I was walking into enemy territory. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper, and as soon as I stepped into the reception area, I saw Mason already there. Flanked by a man in a perfectly tailored navy suit and a woman clutching a leather portfolio. His entourage. The way they stopped talking when they saw me said more than words ever could. "He doesn't need to be in there," Mason muttered to Annika, who stood by the inner door with a file in her hands. "This is a corporate matter now. Mom's estate is tied directly to the company, and we have succession plans." She cut him off with a practiced calm I suspected came from years of dealing with entitled heirs. "Your mother's instructions were clear, Mason. Both of you are named parties. Both of you will be present." The navy suit man, I later learned he was a company counsel, chimed in, his voice coated in condescension. "Mr. Parker, before we proceed, I should remind you of a morality clause in the company's bylaws. Any public disparagement of Hale Freight Systems or its leadership could impact your eligibility for certain inheritances." His glance toward Mason was almost theatrical. I didn't take the bait, but my gut twisted. It was a thinly veiled threat to keep me quiet, a warning shot that whatever was in that might come with strings they'd try to yank. Inside the conference room, the table was long enough to park my entire apartment on. Mason slid into the chair directly across from Annika, pulling a stack of typed pages from his portfolio and arranging them neatly, like he was about to chair the meeting himself. I took the seat near the end, my coat sleeve brushing against the polished mahogany, painfully aware of the fray at my cuff. The tension was thick enough to chew. Mason leaned back, gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said just loud enough for the others to hear, "Hope you're ready for a reality check, Dad. This isn't about charity. This is about competence." I gripped the arms of my chair and reminded myself of the 3 items on my list. Show up, listen, don't take the bait. But in that moment, it felt less like a will reading and more like walking into a chess match where my opponent had been studying my weaknesses for decades. And I couldn't shake the sense that before this was over, they'd try to corner me into forfeiting before the real game even began. Nika cleared her throat, opened a thick leather-bound folder, and began in that even, deliberate tone lawyers seem to master from birth. "This is the last will and testament of Victoria Hale, executed on October 14th of last year. It supersedes all prior documents." Mason sat forward, hands clasped, eyes bright like a man waiting for a champagne cork to pop. To my beloved son, Mason Hale, she read, I leave my lakefront condominium on Shoreline Drive, along with $400,000 to be dispersed from my personal accounts. Mason's grin was almost a smirk, until Annika kept going. This bequest is contingent upon Mason completing 1 full year of salaried employment outside of Hale Freight Systems and any affiliated companies. The smirk faltered. What? Mason barked, half rising from his seat. Annika didn't flinch. The conditions are non-negotiable. Your mother believed you needed experience beyond the scope of the family business. Before Mason could fire back, Annika turned a page and looked directly at me. To Eli Parker, she said, and I swear I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights over the pounding in my ears. I leave the controlling interest, 61%, in the Hale Foundation, including all associated voting shares in Hale Freight Systems, with appointment as steward of mission for a period of no less than 5 years. Mason's chair screeched against the hardwood as he stood, eyes wide. You're joking. That's the company's heart. The foundation votes control the board. But Annika was already producing a sealed flash drive from a small envelope. Victoria left a video message to be played at this point. She inserted it into a laptop, and there she was on the screen, older, sharper around the edges, but still with that calm certainty in her voice. Mason, Eli, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. Mason, you've inherited my drive, but not yet my grounding. You've had the benefits of success without the hunger that built it. This condition is my way of giving you what your father once gave me, perspective. Eli, I know you never asked for this, but you've lived your life serving others without needing a spotlight. I trust you to guide the foundation's influence not for ego, but for purpose. Mason looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. His lips moved, but no sound came. The counsel beside him started to whisper something about contesting, but Mason didn't even seem to hear. I sat there stunned, the weight of the moment pressing into my bones, not from the money or the control, but from hearing Victoria say, after all these years, that she still saw value in the man I was when we first met. For the first time in the entire meeting, it was Mason who couldn't meet my eyes. Mason recovered just enough to slam his palms on the table, sending a neat stack of his prepared press releases sliding to the floor. This is a setup, he snapped at Annika. She wasn't thinking clearly. He manipulated her somehow. But Annika calmly slid a second folder toward him. Your mother anticipated that objection. You'll find certified evaluations from 2 independent medical professionals conducted within weeks of her signing this will. Both confirmed she was in perfect mental health. Mason didn't even touch the folder. His lawyer did, flipping pages in silence, the legalese and signatures undeniable. Then Annika added something I hadn't expected. There's also this, an internal audit report from the foundation 6 months ago. It details irregularities in expense accounts under your approval, Mason, vendor consultancies that coincidentally routed payments to shell entities. She let the implication hang in the air. Mason's cheeks flushed deep red. That's company business, he muttered, but the counsel beside him leaned away like he didn't want to be part of the blast radius. The fallout was immediate. Annika confirmed the foundation's voting power meant my appointment as steward could block any board action, including naming Mason as CEO, until his conditions were met. By the time the meeting adjourned, 2 board members had already emailed to schedule an introduction with me to discuss continuity. Mason, still standing by his overturned chair, looked at me with something between fury and disbelief. You think you've won? You don't even know how to run a freight company. I stood, gathering my coat slowly. Maybe not yet, but I know the difference between moving goods and moving people, and I plan to do both. In the days that followed, Mason issued a statement to the press that he was considering options. Behind the scenes, I sent him a formal offer, a paid 1-year placement at a partner nonprofit managing logistics for disaster relief, enough to fulfill the condition in his bequest. Whether he took it or not was his choice. I wasn't interested in vengeance. I was interested in making sure Victoria's final wishes meant something. And as I walked into my first foundation meeting, past the glass doors etched with her name, I realized I'd been given more than control. I'd been given a chance to rewrite how this family defined success. 6 months later, the Hale Foundation's trucks rolled out of a new community warehouse on the east side, their trailers packed with cold chain units bound for rural clinics that had never been able to keep vaccines from spoiling. I stood in front of a small crowd with a pair of oversized scissors, the ribbon fluttering in the summer breeze, and kept my speech to a single line: "We move what matters." Cameras clicked, but I noticed Jade leaning against the fender of one of the trucks, grinning like she owned the place. She was now a paid intern, using her knack for coding to streamline delivery routes into Appalachia, shaving hours off critical supply runs. Mason showed up without warning that day. No entourage, no suit. Just jeans, a faded polo, and calluses that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen him. He'd taken the nonprofit job, I'd learned, working in hurricane relief shipments down south. He waited until the crowd thinned, then walked up and shook my hand. "Didn't know boxes could be so heavy," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, "Or guilt." I nodded, keeping my voice low so only he could hear. Both get lighter when you carry them with someone else. He didn't promise anything, and I didn't ask for it, but for the first time in years his eyes didn't look past me. That night, back in my apartment, I replaced the peeling duct tape on the radiator, not because it was failing, but because I liked the feeling of keeping things in working order. On the wall above my desk, I'd framed a still from Victoria's will video, her mid-sentence with rare, almost unguarded smile. I'd learned the hard way that revenge is a hollow prize, and that winning doesn't always mean someone else has to lose. What mattered, what always mattered, was knowing who you are when the noise fades, when there's no one left to impress but yourself. And maybe, if you're lucky, that's enough to make even the heaviest loads worth carrying. At its heart, this story is about the quiet strength it takes to confront injustice without letting bitterness consume you. Eli's journey reminds us that walking away from toxic silences and standing your ground doesn't always mean charging in with fists raised. Sometimes it means showing up, listening, and letting the truth speak for itself. We see how entitlement and resentment can blind people to their own growth, and how love, even when buried under years of distance, can resurface in ways that challenge our assumptions about fairness and legacy. The real victory isn't in winning over someone else, but in reclaiming self-respect, choosing responsibility over revenge, and creating space for others to see the value in humility and service. It's a reminder that in life, as in any American small town or big city, the measure of a person isn't just in what they build, but in how they use what's been entrusted to them. Fairness isn't about everyone getting the same outcome. It's about making sure the outcome honors the truth of who we are and what we've stood for. And sometimes the greatest change comes when we stop trying to rewrite the past and start building a better present. If this story spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a moment where standing quietly in your own truth made all the difference? Give this video a like if you believe in the power of dignity over drama, and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that stir both the heart and the mind. Until next time, may you find your own peace after the storm.